Hey guys, welcome back to Mountain Murders Offbeat.
I'm Heather.
And I'm Dylan.
We continue our series on asylums.
Yes, this has made me had nightmares.
No way.
Yeah.
About what?
About like being forced against your will to be taken into a place like this, or the medical procedures.
Really?
They claim them to be medical procedures, but it's torture.
It is torture. Today we're going to be talking about Pennhurst, originally known as the Eastern Pennsylvania Institution for the Feeble-minded and Epileptic. Pennhurst was opened and accepted its first patient on November 23rd of 1908 in Spring City, Pennsylvania. It was built to house less than 500 patients, but by 1950, there were 3,350 patients.
It's just a theme amongst these hospitals, overcrowded almost all in the beginning.
Within 4 years of its opening, Pennhurst had severe overcrowding issues coupled with the reductions in funding. It was understaffed. The state school and hospital were pressured to admit criminals, immigrants, and orphans.
Oh, so they're just throwing everybody into this institution.
It's absolutely what they were doing, Dylan. Like the other hospitals we've discussed on Offbeat, Pennhurst was almost completely self-sufficient. The Pennsylvania Railroad added a station at Pennhurst to deliver coal and other supplies. The sprawling campus eventually hosted 20 buildings, including a farm.
Yeah, so they have full service. They're getting all their supplies on the railroad, and I'm assuming the coals for boilers or things like that. And so I find it's very interesting that I just don't get, it's like all these places have something in common. It's like where you just throw away things that are issues and people that you don't want to deal with. And so this even takes it a step further here at Pennhurst to just outright include people who aren't mental patients.
No, absolutely. What you're saying is totally true. It was almost as if they were shoving these people off, and Pennhurst was like out of sight, out of mind, and the least amount of contact that Pennhurst, its staff, or its patients had with the outside world, the better.
Yeah, so
Seems to be the attitude.
What kind of environment, from a safety perspective, would you have when you have people who really are having mental issues? That comes with a danger of its own, them harming themselves or others. And then you have criminals, actual criminals, and orphans, little kids with no parents or anyone looking out for them. So I just don't understand what kind of environment this would be.
Patients were encouraged to work in various industries around the hospital, including mattress making, shoemaking and repairs, grading, farming, laundry, domestic services, sewing, painting, butchering, and working in the store.
Well, that sounds like a lot of different career opportunities.
Patients were classified as either imbecile or insane, then classified as healthy or epileptic. They were then labeled according to their dental health.
Okay, that seems like some interesting categories.
Well, it's a really vague way to label people, right?
Well, I feel sorry for the people who had epilepsy back in the day because they were just like, it's like doctors didn't understand what was going on and couldn't do anything about it. And instead of admitting that they didn't quite know why they had these seizures or even what a seizure was, oh, well, then something must be wrong with them. Just send them to the mental hospital.
In the 1960s, around 2,700 patients were at the hospital, with most being children. There were a total of 9 doctors and 11 teachers, so you can see this situation is rife with serious neglect.
Yes, and so did you say 9 doctors and 11 teachers?
Yes.
For thousands of people?
Yes.
Yeah, that's not going to work.
Children were left in metal cages, wallowing in their own feces for days at a time. The place was crawling with roaches, rats, and flies. Children aged 6 months to 5 years old were tied to their beds. An NBC affiliate news reporter named Bill Baldini released a 5-part docuseries called Suffer the Little Children in 1968, which revealed the horrific conditions inside Pennhurst. Though all the patients were referred to as children, the average age at Pennhurst was 37 years old, with most having been institutionalized for at least 21 years of their lives.
Jesus, so these conditions, this kind of place was still going in 1968?
Yeah.
Wow, that just blows my mind.
In the documentary Suffer the Little Children, a man named Dr. Fear, and yes, that is his real name, Dr. Fear.
Now, even if I was at my family practitioner and they're like, Dr. Fear will be in to see you in a minute, I would be uncomfortable.
He admitted on camera that he often threatened patients with violence and punished them. One of his favorite methods was to find the most painful injection possible that wouldn't cause any actual damage and give that to patients that he felt were misbehaving.
So just
Punish them by giving them the most painful injection he could.
yeah, I mean, so you're using medicine in a way to punish people. I mean, that's just sadistic as hell.
It was revealed in the 1960s that $5.90 was the average spent on patients per day at Pennhurst, which was $2 less than budgeted for animals at the zoo, the state zoo.
So they're spending more to take care of the animals at the zoo.
Yeah. Many patients were underfed or were incapable of feeding themselves, so many were emaciated. Other patients learned to eat really quickly, covering their plates for fear their food would be stolen by the more violent patients. A lawsuit was brought forth by Terry Lynn Halderman, a patient at Pennhurst. She had 40 injuries while there, including cracked teeth, a broken jaw, broken ribs, and fingers.
Well, I just couldn't send anyone in my family, and even if, say, your family member did end up there, and you do have contact with them, it seems to me like it wouldn't take long to notice that it's not up to par.
I have some excerpts from the court findings, and they detail the atmosphere at Pennhurst. Absolutely fucking horrible, Dylan. No psychologists are on duty at Pennhurst at night or over the weekend. Thus, if a resident has an emotional crisis, he or she may go without treatment until the next morning or until the weekend is over. At Pennhurst, restraints are used as control measures in lieu of adequate staffing. Restraints can be either physical or chemical. The physical restraints range from placing the individuals into a seclusion room to binding the person's hands or ankles with muffs or posies and binding the individual to a bed or a chair. Chemical restraints are usually psychotropic, tranquilizing drugs. Seclusion rooms have been used to punish aggressive behavior. One 18-year-old individual spent 6 consecutive days in seclusion in 1974 for assaulting a Down syndrome patient. Often physical restraints are used due to staff shortages. An extreme example is a female resident who, during the month of June 1976, was in a physical restraint for 651 hours.
Continuous?
For the month of August 1976, this patient was in physical restraints for 720 hours. During September of 1976, was in physical restraints for 674 hours, 20 minutes. And during the month of October 1976, was in physical restraints for 647 hours, 5 minutes.
So you're talking, what, half the month? Or a third of the month, basically?
I can't do math, but that's what I assume, Dylan.
Yeah, let's say, well, no, actually, it's more than that. It's basically almost the entire time.
This resident was so extremely self-destructive, she totally blinded herself. She was not enrolled in any kind of occupational therapy until early 1977. And once initiated into occupational therapy, her programming was quite successful. And then she was able to be out of the restraints for as much as 4 hours per day. So had this programming been initiated earlier, those self-inflicting injuries might not have happened, or maybe would have at least been lessened.
Well, yeah, I think it's easy to figure out that just locking someone down to a table or, restraining them
Who wouldn't
continuously
self-harm or, be so
agitated.
Yeah, exactly. That you would react in some way that might harm yourself.
Even especially if you do have a diminished mental capacity of some form or type, then your natural instincts of fight or flight are going to kick in when you're handled aggressively by people or locked up. Then every time you get a chance, you're likely going to strike out.
Psychotropic drugs at Pennhurst are often used for control and not for treatment, and the rate of drug use on some of the units is extraordinarily high. The physical environment at Pennhurst is dangerous to the residents, both physically and psychologically. There is often excrement and urine on the ward floors, and the living areas do not meet minimal professional standards for cleanliness. Outbreaks of pinworms and infectious diseases are rampant.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so that was in the depositions related to this Halderman case. So Halderman had been admitted to Pennhurst in 1966 when she was 12 years old. During her 11 years at Pennhurst, she suffered horrible conditions. When she was first admitted, Terry could speak several words, including mama, dada, nana, noi noi, which meant no, and baba, like for drink. But by the end of her time at Pennhurst, she was no longer vocal and she couldn't speak at all.
So she was trying to speak and communicate when she came there. And then obviously after being treated like this and basically tortured, she'd shut down and wasn't speaking at all.
Yeah, and she had no one to work with her. There was no speech therapist. There was no one to give her any kind of one-on-one. So she was just ignored and then just wasn't practicing her words.
You know, even at those numbers to patients ratios, even if the teachers and doctors and psychologists available were the best, most well-intentioned people, there's no way to get to everyone and give them any kind. I think in numbers like that, you could hardly spend 5 minutes a day with anyone.
Another patient named Charles Dinolfi was admitted to Pennhurst at age 9 and stayed there until he was 45 years old. During that time, his family noticed during each visit he'd be wearing a bandage of some kind on an injury. He lost an eye during a shower accident, and his remaining eye was injured to the point of near blindness. He had few teeth remaining, as most had been knocked out, and his nose was broken so many times that it was obviously battered.
What the hell kind of accident can you have in the shower to cost you an eye?
That's a good question, Dylan.
I mean, the only thing that comes to mind is like falling and hitting like the faucets.
I believe an orderly explained it as he had hit his eye on a spigot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That seems odd.
It does. Other patients had black eyes, cigarette burns on their bodies, bites, broken teeth, scratches, bruises, cuts, and broken bones. Several patients died at the hands of others while at Pennhurst. Patients were often left in straitjackets strapped to wheelchairs for days at a time, not allowed to walk around at all because there was not enough staff there to supervise them. Around 21 of the 45 housing units were locked, so patients could never leave their wards. The ones who were admitted voluntarily or turned 18 were supposedly free to leave at any time, but this was not the case. Many were kept against their will after they'd turned 18.
What, is like forced labor or something like that?
Well, they were just kept there, and no one kept on top of the records, who could leave, who couldn't leave. All the wards were locked.
Oh, I see. So it's just them not staying on top of who's 18, who's legally allowed to leave now. No one's paying any of that, any attention.
No, and because all of the wards were locked, someone who was there voluntarily or was of age to make the decision to leave couldn't just leave.
Well, I mean, can we say that's a safety fire hazard big time?
Exactly. Teeth removal was a common occurrence at Pennhurst. If a patient was known to bite, doctors, nurses, staff members would order having their teeth removed.
Just remove all their teeth.
Yep. All it would take was one incident of biting.
Man, just to be a younger person and have someone forcefully pull all your teeth, and now they're just gone. That's not something you can fix back. Well, I mean, in the modern day, I'm sure, but it's still not the same, as having your teeth.
Let's talk about some of the paranormal activity happening at Pennhurst. The Quaker Building is known for numerous shadow manifestations, and these manifestations will just dissipate at will. The shadows include what appear to be small female children. One particular has long black hair, a hunched over presence with long dangling arms, and the upper portion of bodies looking over or around obstacles.
That's some pretty scary go. The hunched over. with the long dangly arms, now that right there just makes my skin crawl.
Doors and rocking chairs have moved without anyone being near them. One paranormal investigator was shoved from behind hard enough on a stairway to leave a deep red mark on the small of the back. One investigator was scratched on the arm by an unknown object when they were not by anything or close to walls. Objects are often propelled in the basement. There is a pry bar, some sort of brass fixture, and various other unknown objects that just go flying through the air.
Well, it doesn't sound like a place you would want to be by yourself.
Multiple EVPs have been captured there, electronic voice phenomena, as well as EMF spikes throughout the building when there is no electric supplied to any of the buildings there. One psychic medium, a woman named Sharon Pugh, felt multiple energies there, including either a demonic force or a past life that wasn't a very nice person.
Wow, so the EMP pulses when there's no electricity at all to the entire area.
Yeah,
building,
the EMF.
Or I'm sorry, the EMF.
The spikes, yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting.
According to an article in Weird, New Jersey, a paranormal team experienced the following at the hospital. Inside the Limerick building, they saw the apparition of a woman in an old-style nurse's uniform. She was observed by both a firefighter, a police officer, and a former Marine. They caught multiple EVPs. The Mayflower building, there were a lot of shadow people seen throughout the building multiple times. They captured multiple EVPs, and some of the investigators were touched in the building.
What would you do if you experienced any of that?
I would just be happy someone was paying attention to me.
Well, that's not true. What someone hit you, an unseen force hit you, or you got a scratch and you're like in the middle of the room away from a wall, not touching any object.
Well, I end up with all sorts of random bruises and scratches on my body anyway that I have no idea how it happened. So it just would be normal for me. I'm like the clumsiest person on the planet.
So you're saying you're being haunted?
I don't know. Either that or I just like run into shit all the time, which is true.
And you don't even remember.
I don't. The Philadelphia building, there have been loud sounds and voices heard coming from the building. There's a tunnel system, much like Broughton Hospital.
Yeah, it seems like these places always have the creepy tunnel system.
And the tunnel system is supposedly one of the most haunted areas of the hospital. When they were in this tunnel system, they heard all sorts of noise and sounds coming from inside the tunnel, but there was no one in there.
Well, I wonder if there's some reason for these tunnel systems other than, I mean, they say things like moving patients about without taking them out in the weather or in public's view. But it's costly to build a tunnel. You know, that's a lot of cost there. So that's pretty interesting that a lot of these places have a tunnel system.
Well, this is in Pennsylvania, and I imagine the winters there are fairly harsh. And especially if you think back to like the early 1900s, I'm sure winters there were pretty severe.
Well, that's true. And it would be, if you did have that system in place, it would be an efficient kind of controlled way of moving people around, I guess.
Inside the administration building, there are lots of voices heard. And one thing that happens quite a bit, people hear the sounds of toilets flushing, but the building has no running water or bathroom fixtures.
That's wild.
Inside the Hershey building, investigators heard a female child's voice call out on the third floor. It's pretty creepy, huh?
Yeah, that would freak me out. I would run screaming from the place if I heard that.
Like Broughton and some of the other hospitals out there, eugenics was fairly common at Pennhurst.
Yeah, again, a very horrible program that was championed by a lot of people in the medical community as well as affluent people around our nation. The fact that you think you're better or you know better for entire groups of people and that you're literally sterilizing them like animals.
Yeah, there were about 270 sterilizations performed in the various public institutions in Pennsylvania. And from what I gather, quite a few of those were performed at Pennhurst. So this is supposed to be a school. And none of these people are getting educated whatsoever.
It doesn't sound like a school at all.
No.
No, it sounds like another run-of-the-mill, just your ordinary asylum where people are mistreated that should be getting some kind of help. And if you can't give them help, at least being looked after and taken care of properly.
Now Pennhurst has closed in 1987, and it's owned by a private family who opened it up as a haunted attraction. So now every year they have a haunted house at Pennhurst Asylum.
Is that your dream, to buy an old asylum and make it a haunted house?
Nope.
Say that's not going to happen, huh?
No, I don't know. I guess I have mixed feelings about it. I think it's kind of interesting, but I also feel like in some ways it's a bit disrespectful to the people who lived there and died at the facility.
I agree with that.
I mean, yeah. I think opening it up for tours, talking about the history, and even having like the paranormal tours seems less tacky than just having a full-blown haunted house there.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, because by having historical tours and things, you're kind of bringing to light and keeping alive the memories of the things that people suffered and the ways they suffered there. And but yeah, making it a full-on kind of hokey, crazy, the crazy people haunted house thing. Yeah, that's a little bit unnecessary.
Yeah, it just seems disrespectful, especially to the people who were there, their families. I mean, a lot of the people still live in the area. And when they opened the haunted house at Pennhurst Asylum, many members of the community were outspoken about it. They just didn't feel like it was proper to do that.
Yeah, I'm sure many people around there had family members connected to the place, even if they worked there or were a patient, and they don't think that's in good taste.
Absolutely not in good taste, Dylan. So what do you think about Pennhurst? Does it sound like one of the worst hospitals we've discussed?
I mean, it's got all the same elements for the most part, and maybe not that one head doctor or whatever who was like in more control. It doesn't seem to be coming up in your story, and I know you researched it well. But maybe not as a sadistic leader as maybe some of the other hospitals had. But it just sounds like every other place. Overcrowded, understaffed, underfunded. And what I think sets this one apart is it sounds like it was just, literally like a trash dump for society's unwanted people.
Yeah, well, the thing that makes Pennhurst different or differentiates it from the others is that it was a state school. And so the intention was to bring people here, to educate them, to give these kids a place where they could learn and excel, and possibly learn a skill or whatever, be released back to their homes, their families, back to the community. And that quickly fell by the wayside.
Well, I mean, if that was the intent of the institution, then I think it's even worse because it obviously failed miserably.
No, it absolutely did.
That.
And the thing is, like, a lot of the procedures that were performed at, like, Broughton and at Trans-Allegheny were not necessarily performed at Pennhurst. They weren't doing the lobotomies and a lot of this psychiatric treatment that was actually just torture.
Oh, like the electroshock or...
Yeah, they weren't really doing that, but these people were just horribly neglected.
Yeah, I mean, just the isolation, being strapped down, being kept in cages. I mean, what human deserves to be treated like that? And I just don't know. I know it takes a certain type of person to work in a place like this, period, even if you have a good heart. But I just don't know who could go know this is happening and be okay with it.
One of the trustees, a chief physician there named Henry Goddard, he was one of the leading eugenicists, and he said every feeble-minded person is a potential criminal. The general public, although more convinced today than ever before that it is a good thing to segregate the idiot or the indistinct imbecile, they have not as yet been convinced as to the proper treatment of the defective delinquent, which is the brighter and more dangerous individual. So he's like all about eugenics, calling these people imbeciles and idiots, that they have to be segregated from society.
And they're all just a criminal waiting to happen.
That was the attitude.
Yeah, he's an asshole.
So, yeah, I mean, it just doesn't sound like a great place to be. And in 1983, there were 9 employees indicted on charges ranging from slapping and beating patients, including some that were wheelchair bound, to arranging for patients to assault each other.
So they were arranging bum fights amongst the patients
Yes.
for their entertainment.
Yes.
Jesus.
That is absolutely what they were doing.
Yeah, well, that doesn't surprise me. These types of places always attract evil people. I mean, there's no other way to put it.
Now, as I mentioned, it's been bought by a family. They have the haunted house there, but the state also purchased some of the land, and they've been reusing some of the buildings with the Department of Military Affairs as a veterans home, and they have like a veterans center there. So there are some positives that have come out of Pennhurst.
Well, okay. Dang, these asylums, they make me sad and scared at the same time.
Are you going to be okay?
Yeah, I think so. You may have to hold me later.
Well, I think we're going to have one more asylum that we dig into next week, and then we're going to move on to something else with Offbeat.
Oh my God. What's next?
If you have not listened to our Mountain Murders episode this week, check it out about the Hare Krishna murders.
Oh, that was such a wild and interesting tale.
We've had a lot of positive feedback. People are like, wow, I had no idea. What an interesting story. Never heard this before. So if you haven't, check it out. It's a good one.
Yeah, and if you love that or any other episodes, you can get more Mountain Murders on patreon.com/Mountain Murders.
Podcast.
Patreon. See, I always screw that up. Say it for him, Heather.
It's patreon.com, Dylan, /Mountain Murders Podcast.
Yeah, that's exactly what I said.
That's not what he said.
But you can join us over there for just a couple of bucks even and get a whole lot of extra content.
As always, we appreciate you guys taking the time to listen, and we'll be back on Sunday with more true crime. You can also check out our brand new podcast, Batshit Crazy.